All right, here's another big one that I've been holding back for years. I told you guys about how I know what it's like to die in the Nam. Well, here's another one that happened during that same period of, it was probably about 2 weeks. I think now it was 2009. Isn't it funny how the mind works? When you recall, that we are so often able to recall a particularly vivid memory. We can tell you what something tasted like, what it sounded like. We can recall the most intimate details of a person or place, a thing. Yet we are often at a loss as to what year it was. What was the date? Was it a Tuesday? Was it afternoon? What year was it? Am I the only one that struggles with that? So I had this flurry of terrifying nighttime experiences in 2009 here in Las Vegas. I lived in an apartment. I was still living as a man at that time. I was living with my ex-wife and our young child, and we had a baby on the way. And during this period of my life, I was under intense pressure from many sides. Pressure to conform, pressure to keep my mouth shut. You see, I married into an Anglo-Saxon Protestant Republican family. So even when I was living outwardly as a man, which caused enough stress as it is, I often had to keep my mouth shut about politics around them. Yeah, my in-laws especially. So yeah, a lot of pressure, and I really think being under intense psychological, social, parental, any kind of work pressure, any intense, crushing pressure you can imagine being under might be, at least in part, what triggered these terrifying series of experiences for me. I don't know if it's true for everyone. Just as beautiful music tends to lift me into an out-of-body experience, being under intense pressure, particularly social pressure, seems to be what triggers a different type of nighttime experience. I used to be confused as to the difference between what I'm about to tell you and the out-of-body night flight experiences I shared on another video. No, this one is a lot more like, I can't even, every time I think about dying out of that helicopter, all these years, I had that experience in 2009. This is 2026. I almost never talk about it, but it's on my mind a lot. The helicopter incident that I told you about in the previous video. Now we're going to talk about a different nighttime experience that triggers me almost as badly, but not quite as much. The worst of them is the Vietnam thing. Dying under that damn helicopter, that is the worst, by far. The most intense preternatural experience I have yet had. I literally have PTSD from that experience. literally from lying down to go to sleep, and then being diverted elsewhere, and then returned back to my body and waking up screaming, having no idea what the fuck just happened to me and how and why. And I've been struggling with it all these years. After the helicopter dream, if you want to call it a dream, which I really doesn't even come close. But I think there's all kinds of dreams. At least for me there is. Just like there's different kinds of jokes, right? There's harmless jokes, there's practical jokes, and then there's killing jokes, where it all goes sideways and wrong and somebody gets hurt. That's how it is for me when I lay down to go to sleep. I live in Las Vegas, but honestly, I rarely gamble. With money. But every time I close my eyes to go to sleep, I am gambling, because the most intense, profound, life-altering experiences that I've had thus far in my 55 years in this container, 3 out of 5 of them happened while I was supposedly asleep. Yeah. So here we go. I'm going to talk about the Russian soldiers on horses. Just as I had told you in the previous video about how my soul had apparently somehow slipped out of my sleeping body and entered the body of another person. In that case, it was a young soldier. God, that fucks me up. I get the willies. I get PTSD every time I think about it. So I want to focus on this, on the guys on the horseback dream, okay? Whatever it was, sleep experience. Just as in the Vietnam thing, my soul somehow, instead of staying with my sleeping body, somehow went into the body of a young man who was in his last moments on Earth, dying in the Vietnam War. And I got to ride along in his container and experience that with him. And that experience has changed my life. But this one is almost as intense. On another night in 2009, during that same intensely high pressure period that I was experiencing while living as a man, with a wife and a young child and a baby on the way, working full-time, going to school. It was just a lot. You have no idea. It's another video. But on this night, I lay down and I told you guys this in the Vietnam video, but during this period, I was so intensely terrified of going to sleep that I started going to bed with a loaded M9 Beretta pistol under my pillow. That's the state of mind I was in at bedtime. That's how bad this was getting. It was intense. If you were to reach out to my ex-wife, I'm certain she would agree. She was also at a loss. She was right there with me while these terrible things were happening to me every night for a couple of weeks. She was with me. And she was just as scared as I was. So on this other night, when I finally was able to fall asleep in Las Vegas in 2009, in my outwardly male container at that time, as soon as I fell asleep, I felt sweat in my eyes. sweat, hot, stinging sweat. It was hot. I was hot. And I was like literally trying to catch my breath, and I was leaning forward on I knew I was outdoors. It was daytime. I was in the country. Which country is another question, but I was in the countryside. I was leaning on a fence post, leaning forward on it, literally trying to catch my breath and wiping sweat out of my eyes because I've been working my ass off. And I didn't turn around to look, but I knew it was the field behind me that I had been toiling in all day. And I knew that it was my land. I knew that it was my crop. I knew that I was on my property. Because that fence post that I was leaning on to catch my breath and wipe the sweat out of my eyes was the demarcation line of my property. I knew that was my farmhouse behind me. I knew that was my family inside. And I knew what I looked like, and it wasn't the guy laying in bed in Las Vegas in the year 2009 in his apartment next to his wife. It wasn't that guy. It was a different guy. On that night, I had somehow, my soul, my spirit had dropped into the container of a young man with blonde hair and blue eyes. Not this one. It was a different person. This was a different person. He was a young man. I was in his body, and I knew what I looked like. And I knew right where I was and what was happening. I had been working all day, and I was about to stop work, and I was about to go into the house and eat dinner with my wife and kids. But they were not the same wife and kids that was with the sleeping man in Las Vegas in 2009. I knew I was not that guy, but I knew that I was in his container with him somehow, looking through his eyes, feeling his feelings. I was with him, in his body with him. I do not know if he was aware of me, but I was intensely aware of what was happening. So during this moment, I'm just going to say me because I was in his body. I knew I was in Europe. I knew it was Eastern Europe. I knew that my container did not speak English. But none of that stopped me from, and I didn't speak his language, but none of that stopped me from understanding his thoughts. I can't explain that. And the more I learn about my telepathic abilities, the more I'm surprised to find that spoken language is not really a barrier so much. I mean, I don't speak very good Spanish, but I know what Spanish speakers are thinking all the time around me in real life, all the time in everyday life, and other languages. So I live on the Las Vegas Strip, so every time I get on the bus, I'm surrounded by German and French and Spanish and Russian and every language you can imagine. But I still know what people are thinking. I still see through them. Lately, everybody is this. Sometimes it's a little blurry or a little unclear, but I can still see through them. Even if the label on the container is in another language, I still see. So here I was, and I knew who I was riding along with that night, roughly. I don't know his name. I don't know his address. I'm not even entirely sure what year it was or what country it was. But just as you remember your first kiss, you probably don't remember the exact date, do you? If you do, maybe it's for a good reason, like it was maybe Valentine's Day or something, but I'm using that as an example. Just ask yourself, think about an intense memory of yours, one that's with you all the time, like this one is for me. And then ask yourself, what was the date? What was the time? Do you know? So that's kind of what this is like. On that particular night, I was riding along with my soul, my spirit was in the body of a young Eastern European man with blonde hair and blue eyes. He was very physically fit. I felt it because I was in that body, and it felt ropey and lean and strong. His arms felt like steel cables. It felt good for me to flex them a little because I was in the body. Just like I was in that other young man's body who was under the helicopter. Only that was different because that man was expiring quickly when I joined him. But this European guy, he was in the prime of his health. He was young. I want to say 21 comes to mind. Like he was 21 years old, I think. But he had a wife and kids. He had land. He had property. He had a house. He had that field. He had his crops. He was working, doing his own work for himself. And that fence that he was leaning on to catch his breath before he went in to eat dinner, that his wife was cooking for him in that house behind him. Well, everything was about to change because some strangers decided to pay us a visit. We were in the countryside. I'm going to say we because I'm along for the ride. I was seeing through this guy's eyes. We were in the countryside. It was summertime. I knew we were in Europe. And there was a dusty road nearby. There was fields and there's woods and there's, it was that kind of place. I think it might have been Poland. I'm almost certain of it. At least what we call Poland now. Or maybe what we used to call Poland then. Because as any Pole will tell you, they are often treated like the doormat of Europe. And their borders change, their very existence changes. More to come about Poland. I have many thoughts on that place. But back to the story. Here I am looking through the eyes of this hard-working young man, about to stop his day of work to go and have dinner with his wife in his house, with his kids and his everything. And some men appeared on that dusty road, and they were on horseback, and they were riding toward us. I knew there was a pump well nearby because I grew up with one in Michigan in the woods. Yeah, you talk about Gen X drinking out of garden hoses. I did that and drank out of a ka-chunk, 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 a pump well in the woods. I did. Well, in this dream experience, whatever it was, me and this guy, we had just been drinking water out of our pump well on our land. And we were wiping that sweat out of our eyes, and then we got some water and we splashed it on our face out of the well. And we were just trying to we're like going like this with our sleeve because we didn't have a towel nearby or anything. And it was a white shirt and it was dirty, I know that. It was kind of baggy, it had a baggy sleeve on. That's what I was wearing, what my guy was wearing. And I think he had suspenders on for some reason. I think I felt them when I was aware of the muscles. I think I felt the tension of the suspenders. But that dirty, oversized white shirt, I could feel the fabric. When we wiped it across our face, I felt the fabric. It was rough. It was not like modern fabric, like you buy at Walmart even. It was probably homespun, I'm thinking. Homespun or just very crude and cheap by modern standards. This was not the year 2009. It was in the past. So these men were riding toward us on their horses. They weren't galloping, they were just trotting, but not really in a big hurry. They didn't, I mean, you could tell they were going somewhere and they were official, but they didn't really seem like they were in a hurry, if you know what I mean. Because it was a hot day. You could tell they were working, but not working hard. So yeah, I want to say there was 4 of them. Men on horseback. And they were wearing uniforms. And they had weapons. They looked like 20th century soldiers on horseback as opposed to 19th century soldiers on horseback. That might be kind of hard to explain. If you've ever seen a movie about World War II, where you see soldiers on horseback, for example, the scene in the movie Schindler's List, where the people leave the lager, the camp, and they encounter a Russian soldier on horseback in the year 1945. A Russian soldier was on horseback. And the people who left the camp, the survivors, they asked the soldier who they encountered on the road in 1945 after being turned loose, "Which way do we go? What do we do?" And the Russian soldier on horseback told them, "Well, don't go east. They hate you there. Maybe go west." I don't know. But that guy in that scene, in that Steven Spielberg movie, I think it was, wasn't it Spielberg? Yeah, Schindler's List. That one scene, that's what the men in the dream that night were like. They were a lot like that guy. They were dressed a lot like him. They weren't wearing like shiny armor and shit like that. They didn't look like old-fashioned soldiers on horseback. It's not like something you'd see on a calendar picture back in the day or something, you know, or some 19th century battle or something. It was nothing like that, no. These were 20th century guys wearing 20th century uniforms, the color of mud and dust and dirt. They had World War II weapons on them, weapons from that era, 20th century weapons. Wasn't lances and long sabers and shit like that. Now these guys had pistols and submachine guns and rifles, and they were wearing mud-colored uniforms, and they were tired and dirty, and they were kind of goofing off a little bit. I can tell they were coming toward us for some reason. They were coming for us, but not in a big hurry. They weren't too worried about us escaping or anything. So I'm experiencing the thoughts of my host. I'll call him that, this young man that I was riding along with that night from my bed in Las Vegas in 2009. Here I was, obviously in the mid-20th century in Eastern Europe somewhere, or Central Europe maybe, I don't know, seeing an experience through the eyes of somebody who was there, because he is there, and guess what? I was there with him, in his body with him, watching these men on horseback come for me. We knew, we actually thought, we glanced back at the house and we're thinking, in the other language, it was not English, but I was understanding every word of it, every bit of it. Do we have time to go home? What should we do? This is 19-something. That's what year it was. No cell phone. No way to call the house. Even though you can see it, you can't call into the house and say, "Honey, this could be trouble. There's some official-looking guys coming here, and they're coming to see me, and I don't know what's up, but I'm going to be late for dinner." Because even though it's maybe a couple hundred yards from where we're standing at the edge of our fence post, our property line, and our house with our wife and kids in it, it's not that easy to get that message to her in there and say, "Honey, I'm going to be late." She was expecting me for dinner, us, at that time. Soon. That's why we stopped working at that time. But these guys on horseback showed up instead. And they approached our gate. And they opened it and they rode right on through and got back on the horse and rode right on through while I stood there with sweat in my eyes, just looking at them going, what do they think they're doing? And yeah, they had guns. They all had guns. They had a lot of fucking guns. Wearing uniforms the color of baby shit diarrhea, and they had guns. And and their mood changed. Their demeanor changed. When I watched them come riding toward us, sauntering, whatever it is, not in a hurry, coming down the road toward us, they were kind of smoking and joking mindset is where these guys were. They were slacking a little. They were relaxing a little bit. But when they got to our fence and they opened our gate and they just came right on through anyway, without even asking, they saw me there. They fucking saw me there and they didn't ask, can we come into your property? Or is it okay if we come talk to you for a minute? No, these 4 men with guns on horseback opened my fucking gate and rode into my fucking land and rode right up to me where I stood and put themselves between me and my house. So now my property line, my gate, my fence was at my back. And my house with my family in it those guys were between me and my house, with my fence at my back. So they pretty much, the 4 of them, kind of made a semicircle around me, with my back to my fence. And I could see my house behind them. Their demeanor changed. I heard them smoking and joking on their way in, but now they were serious. These guys were serious. Their body language changed, everything. Their faces changed. They were serious. They were on business. And then the talking started. And bear in mind, I'm just an observer. I'm just... My spirit, my soul is just riding along in this young man's body while these other men are doing what they're doing to him. They're ruining his life, and I'm experiencing it with him. And I can't do anything about it. And I don't even speak their language, but I understand everything that's being said. Everything. Long story short, there's an argument. There's some loud voices. There's some tension. Weapons are raised. The man in charge put his hand on his pistol and leaned forward in the saddle. And he told us in that language that I don't even know how to speak, but I understood. The boss man on the horse said, "You're coming with us." Look, I don't know who you are, sir, but this is my property, and that's my house, and I'm expected for dinner. I'm not going with you. I don't even know who you are. And that's when they told me, point blank in no uncertain terms, "You're not going home. You're coming with us." There were no goodbyes. They quickly overpowered my host, and they bodily carried him off to join their army. I knew that my host never saw his home or his wife or his kids ever again. That's it. And then I woke up back in my old outwardly male body in that container, lying in my bed next to my wife at the time, who was pregnant with our second child. And I woke up that night. I didn't wake up screaming that night, but I did wake my wife up that night. It wasn't from screaming. She said I was talking in what sounded like Russian. And she sat up and watched me talking in this other language in my sleep for a long time, until I woke up. Sweet dreams.